Hi everyone, I'm Kai and we're back for another episode of Bake It Better, where we work on mastering the most important techniques in baking. And today we are going to do something that I'm really excited about. We are going to learn how to shape bagels like a pro. So here I have some bagel dough and we're ready to get started. So the first thing you want to do is mix up your bagel dough. I use the recipe on the King Arthur website just called Bagels, but there are lots out there based on what you're looking for. Once you have your bagel dough, the first step in shaping is to turn it out onto your clean work surface and divide it. Use a little bit of flour on your hands if it feels a little bit sticky. You want to divide this based on how big you want your bagels. And I've done a lot of testing and my perfect bagel size is about 110 grams. It's a little bit smaller than my fist. With this batch of bagels, if I divide it into 6 pieces, that's just the right size. Feel free to make your bagels bigger or smaller, whatever you like. Maybe you want mini bagels or maybe you want really big breakfast sandwich bagels. But I'm gonna go for 6 pieces and it's about 110 to 120 grams. Now that we have our bagel dough cut into equal pieces, we're going to start with a pre-shaping technique. And I'm teaching you guys the approach that the pros use. Some recipes might say just go from here and shape it into a bagel. That's okay, but we're gonna teach you how to make bagels that look professional, just as beautiful looking as they taste. So the first step is a pre-shape. And this helps the dough get into a round ball that makes the final bagels look even more round. So flour your hands just ever so slightly if it's sticky. And what you want to do is pull the edges of the dough out and fold them into the middle. And this might look familiar to those of you who have made boules or round loaves of bread. It's the same basic pre-shaping technique where you just pull all the edges into the middle and then make one little seam. Sometimes people call this little purses or little dumplings, and you can just let it rest. And if it's sticking, this dough is cold, so it is sticking a little bit, just flour your bench a little bit and you can put them seam side up or down, it doesn't matter. So same thing, just pull all the edges into the center and then pinch it up. And you can see how these shapes are going to be a lot easier to turn into round bagels than these shapes right here. So pre-shaping, not a necessary step, but super helpful when you are trying to make bagels like a pro. Another way to pre-shape your bagel dough is to turn these pieces into logs. And the way that we do this is just start with your triangle, or maybe it's a rectangle. Take the top and fold it down towards you to make a tube, and just do this a few times, kind of sealing back here either with the palm of your hands or your fingers, and just give it a little bit of a roll. If one end is a little bigger than the other, just kind of extend it and do that a few times. With this guy, I think that I will take this point, fold it down, and you're trying to get just kind of a tube shape, because there's lots of ways to shape bagel dough, but I'm going to show you 2 methods. This way with the round, these little dumplings, it's a little bit easier. It makes bagels that have a smaller hole. And this way with this pre-shaping of a log is a little bit more traditional. You would see this done in a bakery and you end up with larger bagels that have a big hole in the center. So 2 different ways to pre-shape. But don't make the mistake of just cutting out random pieces of dough and expect to go right to perfect bagels. Do this pre-shaping step. So we'll start with our round pre-shapes. The dough doesn't need to rest very long in its pre-shaped form. You can brush any extra flour off, and then you want to use your thumbs and make an impression right in the middle. And you can even just give it a little bit of an impression and say, did I hit the middle? Yep, about right. So use your thumbs and poke through until you get a hole like this. And it's already starting to look like a bagel. Then what you want to do is use your thumbs and fingers to twirl, and I'm giving some pressure, extending it outwards to enlarge the hole gently and just twirling like this to straighten it out. And then once you start to get a hole, you can see if there's any thicker parts or thinner parts, and you can extend the thicker parts a little bit like this until you get a pretty even round. And if it starts fighting back and snapping back, just give it a rest and add a hole to your next one, and then come back and we'll make them a little bit bigger. One common mistake that new bagel bakers might make is making the hole as big as they want the hole to be in the final bagel. These are going to rise and puff because we're gonna let them proof a little bit longer, and then we're gonna boil them. And when we boil them, they puff and that hole will close. So you want your hole to be at least 50% larger at this point than you want in the final bagel. So no one would probably want a bagel like this, that's huge, but you wanna do this at the shaping step. So we've already got two shaped bagels, and some people might say this is a bun with a hole in it. So if you're one of those people, we will show you the more traditional method of shaping bagels. So now I'll show you another way to shape your bagels, which is great if you like really crispy bagels or chewy bagels, have a big hole. You want to start with your pre-shaped tubes. And we're gonna do a technique that's very similar to shaping baguettes. So if you've ever done that before, use the same mechanics. So you want your wrists just resting on the table or your work surface, and then your fingers kind of cupped around the dough, and just start rolling it back and forth. Sometimes it helps to start with one hand. You make kind of this dog bone looking shape. And then once you get that, you add your second hand and add pressure as you're rolling the dough outwards. And we're not looking for tapered ends here. We're looking for pretty much an even width throughout the whole length. And some people who are new to this might worry about one end being skinnier than the other. If that happens, your dominant hand is probably just pressing a little bit harder. So just do what I did and flop it around, and let your other hand work it out. And if it starts to snap back, just give it a rest. Come back to this, start with your dog bone shape. You should hear this swishing noise when you're rolling, and that means that you're putting the right amount of pressure on the table. And if you start sticking like this, you can use a tool and just a little bit of flour. Pick up a little flour on there. And give yourself a break if all of the logs start snapping back, because the gluten will relax and become easier to shape as you give it time. So once we have our dough all stretched out into nice even logs, you want to get rid of any excess flour for this final shaping step. These logs are about 12 to 16 inches depending on how big you want your bagel. So give yourself a little bit of space to work. Make sure that you have a nice even log, and then you're going to take your ends of the dough and kind of twist them around each other to seal them up. And once you have these, you can just kind of pinch them together. Make sure you have no flour on your hands, and then lift it up and stick your hand through the bagel dough and exert some pressure as you roll, and then just make sure it's all kind of sealed up. And this hole looks really big. This will proof up and fill in as it boils and bakes, so this won't end up being as massive as it seems. But you'll see how it's much easier to get a bigger hole and therefore a chewier bagel that gets crispy on the edges than these guys. These are great for topping with a lot of cream cheese or sun butter or peanut butter or jam, and it won't fall through the middle. So let me show you this more traditional technique one more time. So I've got my tube that's all pre-shaped. Roll it out just a little bit more. And I take the ends and twist them together, almost like you're making a knot, and then stick your hand through and just kind of seal it up. And you can roll it back and forth and just make sure that it's sealed. And this dough is really nice to handle, so don't worry about kind of perfecting the shape. You can do that a few times until the point where they've proofed a little bit, they become more delicate, and they're ready to go in the water bath. So final shape, just a little bit of pressure. This guy's a little bit big, but that'll be for whoever wants the chewy bagel. And now we're ready to boil, and I'm gonna top these babies in some everything bagel topping and then bake them until they're golden brown and delicious. And so I really hope that if you've never made bagels before, you use this opportunity to give it a try. I guarantee that any bagel you make at home is going to taste a million times more delicious than one that you get at the store. So give it a try. Aim for something that looks beautiful, but know that even if they turn out a little bit funky shaped, they're gonna taste excellent, and that practice helps you bake it better. So do this again and again, and watch this video as many times as you need, and you guys got this. Good luck.